The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good evening and welcome to my State of Mind. I am Dan York. This week, Joe Biden took to the podium at the Capitol and presented what looked like a traditional State of the Union speech, although it's called a presidential address in year one. Pretty self-explanatory in terms of its impact. We'll talk with Professor Joe Cammarano about it this evening in a conversation that we recorded on Thursday morning, immediately after the presentation on Wednesday night. First, here's a recap from the network about what went on in Washington.
President Biden said America is coming out of the coronavirus pandemic stronger than before.
America is on the move again.
At his first address to a joint session of Congress, the president unveiled his American Families Plan, a $1.8 trillion proposal that expands education and family care.
No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck or taking care of themselves and their loved ones, or parent or spouse or child.
He also pushed his American Jobs Plan, which includes rebuilding the country's infrastructure.
The blue-collar blueprint to build America.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, who delivered the Republican response, said the president is working without reaching across the aisle.
The actions of the president and his party are pulling us further and further apart.
One moment of bipartisanship came when President Biden called for a new health agency to fight diseases like Alzheimer's, cancer, and diabetes.
Providence College professor Joe Cammarano joins me. He's my go-to guy on national politics and the like. And Joe, welcome. This is a new era, no doubt. The feeling last night out of the Capitol was, for me, dramatically different. But let's talk about how weird it was. Although we are very used to 10% capacity in buildings and sports games and all of that, just the weirdness of the introduction of the president to a chamber that looked like it was a typical day on C-SPAN, right? Crazy.
Yeah, it struck me, particularly when they panned up to the First Lady and the second gentleman, I guess we're calling him. And it looked like they wanted to hug, and then they realized they couldn't. There was a lot of that. It is kind of odd, and I'm surprised the White House decided to do it that way. It really felt like a State of the Union address, and I was surprised by that.
Well, surprised by what? If I'm not mistaken, the first speech of the newly elected president is called an address to the nation, to Congress of the nation. You can't declare the State of the Union because you haven't been there long enough to determine it, I guess. But yeah. What about it do you think was interesting?
Well, I think what made it really interesting is it sounded almost like the same structure that you would get if he was in his second and third year. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way that the Biden administration is trying to present itself as sort of, okay, the competent people are back. It's not that only we are competent, but we're now doing it the way we used to. And so we want to sort of say things are already getting better, and here's where we need to go. And that structure is exactly the same as the State of the Union address in a way that I didn't think would happen this year because of the pandemic and because of the lateness of the address.
Oh, okay.
This is the latest this address has ever been given.
Yeah. The other thing from an optics point of view, just I think was just I wouldn't say it's stunning, but it was remarkable, and that is two women behind Joe Biden. He celebrated that at the beginning. I think rightly so. I was wondering what America's feeling about that image would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the perceptions that people have are going to be driven by that, but yes, I too, I think that's a very important thing to note. In part because it wasn't that big a deal. It was like, yeah, okay, finally, we're getting to the point where women are in positions of leadership so that we notice them.
Okay.
I didn't. I didn't get a sense that it was that big a deal. They mentioned it. Everyone knows it's there. But now let's move on.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it, but I think it is a big deal in the sense that I appreciate your being rather nonplussed about it, because that's really how we should be. We should be nonplussed about it. But the picture was profound, and I wonder, while America is trying to go through this thing, well, we really shouldn't think this is incredible because this is supposed to be okay and this is great. It is a demonstrable step forward for the country in the recognition of parity and equity between the genders, and I just wonder how. And I know a lot of people who didn't vote for Joe Biden worried about Kamala Harris. They're worried about Kamala Harris. They're worried about Kamala Harris. And I just thought it was probably a lot for people to swish around in their brains. That's all.
In some ways, maybe the masks that they wore mitigated that a little bit, because, I'm thinking, I'm kind of a novice in neuropsychology and information processing, that not seeing the full face may have blunted what I would say is the instinctual negative response that some people might have if Kamala Harris's full face were there, and Nancy Pelosi. But I just want to say, you may not like these people. You may be afraid of what their policies are, even though Kamala Harris is probably as centrist as Joe Biden is. But I don't think anybody would doubt their competence or their qualifications. And that's why that was such a big deal, is that Nancy Pelosi, hate her or love her, is skilled. Kamala Harris is skilled and experienced. And so for me, that's what mattered. It was a deep understanding that women may actually have finally arrived to the point where we're not going to make a big deal because they're women.
You make a really interesting point about the masks, and this will be our last part on aesthetics. As you swing around the chamber, you had the typical non-response by the opposition party on policy and agenda items that didn't sell, but you can't see the smile or the frown. And sometimes, we're used to panning across the opposition party, and either they're really sullen about something or they're kind of smiling, say, yeah, you got me on that one. And that subtlety was not apparent. That's part of the whole pandemic and the way we're dealing with each other. You're not, from here down, tells you a lot of the story, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not fully conscious of how much visual stimulation affects the way we listen and what we listen to. And I think last night we had an example where we actually listened to what was being said more than watching for all these reactions, because we couldn't see those reactions. So I think that's a very important point.
So moving to the guy that we could see in his full face, those who voted for Donald Trump and those who think I've had kind of who followed me at all on radio or television over the years here, I think I've had some kind of lobotomy regarding the way I see things. But you and I have had a lot of years of commiseration over Donald Trump's approach and style. Never mind the policy stuff is actually less of a contentiousness for, I think, both of us than the way he went about his business. I had this palpable sense of relief last night watching this speech. I'm able to pare away some of the things I worry about in terms of giving the store away or a lot of spending here, and the way we're going to pay for it. But that dynamic of Joe Biden, man, wow.
Yeah, I think what we saw again was a more traditional presidential approach to this. And I also think, again, not saying anything, Biden, by talking for over an hour, and maybe stumbling over a couple of words, he kind of put to rest the notion that he's feeble and that he's got, he's basically getting nursing care and everybody else is running the government for him.
I thought he was in his best comfort zone last night. I mean, that's his home, and I thought I don't think there was. I've seen him nervous. I've been in person when I've seen him, speak. I've seen him speak at conventions. I've seen, we've all seen him. The more anxious he is, the more he's got the stutter thing that goes a little bit. I thought he was in his zone last night.
He delivered it well. He delivered it in plain English, which, the new term is Bidenese. No fancy language, don't denigrate anybody, make sure it's focused on sort of real people. And he obviously had a couple great speechwriters. A local Rhode Island guy probably finished it up for him, Donnellan. And so I think, it was a very effective speech, although it does raise some real problems and concerns that I have as somebody who studies the presidency. He's really upped the ante, and it's going to be hard for him to deliver.
Yeah, okay. When we come back, we'll talk about that. Aesthetics aside and, visuals aside, let's talk about the meat of it with Joe Cammarano next on My State of Mind. So let's dig into it. This is a big money spend that Joe Biden is delivering here. In fact, most folks don't have a single bit of confidence that he can deliver a 40% tax on capital gains. Although I think a lot of Americans are going to like the idea that under $400,000, you're pretty much tax increase free. Tell me what what the pluses and minuses are of this $1.8 trillion plan on top of a $2 trillion infrastructure plan on top of a near $2 trillion COVID relief plan.
Right. A lot of spending and a lot of returning to the wealthy to pay for it. That's the way we used to do it back when Eisenhower was president. And I think what Biden is Biden is inherently a modernist. And a modernist believes if you have a certain level of money, what you have above that, you really don't need, and you're benefiting from the public works that we do, you might as well pay your fair share, as they say, or you might as well pay a larger proportion than anybody else, as the people with that kind of money would argue. So I think we're seeing sort of a return to the old approach. I don't know if it's going to work. That's the problem, is that, think about Biden really believes in policy. And to pay for it, he wants to return taxing wealthy people, which we really don't do very much anymore, and corporations, which we don't really do much anymore, but we used to. The problem is the narrative, that his opponents are into narrative. They're not into substance. They're into sort of coming up with a frame for making an argument and creating an alternate understanding of what this person is trying to do. And I think we saw it in what Senator Scott said last night, that it's return to tax and spend, or taking money away from people who really don't deserve that because they're the ones who make all the money because they work hard. So it's going to be a hard sell.
I think
one seat majority.
Yeah, I hear you. I just think pre-COVID, it was a really hard sell. COVID has done some things that have changed the way people think about government. All of a sudden now, a vaccination program that is government necessary, it's government intrinsic, changes the way you think about government. And, leading up to this, and one of the things that Donald Trump was seizing on, even though I think he was double speaking in a lot of ways, was this idea that nearly half the country, has its hands out, right? So if there's a move toward a feeling that government is not so bad anymore, that government is a solution, that we've needed government to pull us out of this crisis, maybe this is the moment that you can make that reversion.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the way the Biden people see it. That's what they believe. There's a reason to believe that. But the counter narrative, it's always easy to paint a picture of criticism than it is to convince people to actually compromise and do things. And the part of the problem is he's raised his expectations. Very, very popular speech from the early polling. People who watched it were very positive toward it. And I know why. There are lots of really fascinating things I'm going to look into as a result of that speech, like who's strategizing all this, because they're really doing a very good job. But the problem is they're not going to get all of this done. And so what are they not going to get done in order to get some of it done? And so when you don't do everything you say you're going to do, then you have a whole bunch of stuff you can be criticized for. We call that the expectations gap in presidency research, that presidents raise expectations, then they try to meet them and they get up this high. But it's this gap that becomes a point of criticism. And that's what I think is probably going to happen.
Well, look, I mean, the first 100 days are usually owned by the president. The next 100 days are owned by the opposition, whacking the president's intentions. And then doesn't it kind of even out after that? I mean, the 2022 elections are around the calendar corner. There's only 6 seats that separate the Republicans and Democrats right now in the House. That is their target. Look, as far as I'm concerned, that's old-fashioned America. Let's get after it and talk about what we believe in, and hopefully we have less acidity. Trump will be doing his thing from the sideline and from the balcony, right? But hopefully there'll be less acidity and more argument about this stuff. And isn't that good?
Yeah, this is why I was so fascinated by the speech, because what Biden was doing was talking over the heads of members of Congress to the very people that Donald Trump sees as his bread and butter. His emphasis on how these new jobs are going to be mostly non-college educated jobs, that, we're going to actually make sure that if you're working 40 hours, you don't live in poverty anymore. Those are the sorts of appeals to the very base of sort of Trump support, putting aside some of that base, that I think is a really fascinating thing. And I think it's got an eye to 2022, in the sense that I think what the Biden people are saying is, we can have a black swan election. And what that means is the past and all the predictive models we have will not explain this election, because we're going to find a way to change everything. And we are in a period of disruption. Trump was he didn't start it, but he certainly moved it along. And so maybe we're going to see a disruptive election. I think the Biden people are counting on that.
All right. Last thought on where we are nationally. Vaccine rollout, outstanding, but slowing. I don't know whether we're going to pick up the trickle we need to be able to get to, Fauci's 70%. Tell me about the politics of this real quick.
Yeah, real quick. The vaccination thing is fascinating, and it's very depressing for me, because I'm really worried in a year we're going to see certain patterns of death this year that are going to be based on partisanship. And I don't think we're going to get over that. I think there are people who will never get vaccinated, and it's a partisan thing rather than a principle or a science-based thing.
Well, you know what? Yeah, time will tell. Listen, the one thing that we need to recognize and think about this whole thing is that it's a couple of year exercise. Experiencing the pandemic and working our way out of it. It's not a 14 or 16 month exercise.
And the world is blowing up right now, and we're going to have to figure out what to do with that.
All right, when we come back, Rhode Island dodges a bullet, but the professor will tell you it was a taser at best. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, the census comes out, and by the hair of our chinny chin chins, I guess, about 14,000 people really in the population. We retain for the next 10 years 2 congressional seats. Jim Langevin is, breathing a sigh of relief. He'll retain his incumbent status. David Cicilline relieved too that he doesn't have to battle Jim Langevin, although I don't think he would have. You don't think, though, that other than the politics of this thing, that it was too dramatic, Joe?
No, I don't. Again, going from 4 to 3 in the Electoral College Again, Rhode Island isn't a major player in campaigns on the presidential level. When you look at funding for programs where money comes to Rhode Island, as long as we have senators, a senator like Jack Reed, I think Jack Reed retiring is a bigger problem than one congressional seat. And so there's no evidence in political science that it matters how many members of the House you have in your state. So I think we pay a lot of attention to it. It's really not that important.
Well, some of the machinations about it, I read these stories. You might have even commented for a couple of these stories. Dan McKee, the new governor, is relieved that, we have 2 seats because Jim Langevin could have been running against. Oh, please. I mean, could everyone just stop it? Jim Langevin's story is one of such immense courage that the idea that it takes him hours and hours daily to get himself going, I think is testament to the man's fiber. But let's not kid ourselves. Governor is a hands-on, nonstop gig. There's no way Jim Langevin was running for governor. Come on.
I agree 100%. And as I've said before, once you're in the office, you're the favorite anyway, and you tend to scare away people like Langevin.
Although, the Durham beat keeps moving on, Nellie Gorbea and the treasurer, Seth Magaziner, and so be it. I mean, that's what it's going to be. At the end of the day, I think you and I probably said it, and I know that it was my advice to my friend Dan McKee. It's about the vaccine, stupid. So unless and until, and I think he's done a very good job too with his plans and his acceleration, and we're getting to that point where we might have more shots than people looking for it. So competency on that has been an A, I think.
I think competence is the key, and I think McKee, his competence in dealing with the pandemic and the response and the economic recovery and the loosening up of restrictions carefully, that's going to determine his reelection if he runs again.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Joe, good overview. We'll continue to keep pulse on this big spend from the Biden administration. Always appreciate your input. Final word and we come back. Stay with us. On next week's State of Mind, our new Lieutenant Governor, Sabina Matos, will join us. Don't forget, weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO as well. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your weekend and week. Good night.